A 7-year-old child sings a Christmas song in the subway to earn money. When a woman hears her story, she decides to change her life. The subway station was alive with its usual chaos, the screech of brakes, hurried footsteps, and muffled announcements echoing through the underground. Amid the noise, a melody soared, a voice so pure and haunting that it momentarily cut through the clamor. 7-year-old Emily stood near a tiled wall, her small frame wrapped in a threadbare coat far too big for her. She clutched a tin can in one hand and sang with closed eyes, pouring her heart into a Christmas song she had learned from her mother. Silent Night echoed across the platform, its familiar tune drawing a few commuters to pause. Emily wasn't singing for applause or attention. Her voice was her only weapon against a world that seemed determined to ignore her plight. Her mother, Laura, was gravely ill, and the medication she needed was impossibly expensive. Every coin that clinked into the tin can was another step closer to hope, a hope that Emily refused to let go of, even as the days grew colder. Sarah, a woman in her late 40s, stood among the bustling crowd. She wasn't in a rush like the others. Her life had slowed to a standstill ever since she lost her daughter, Lily, in a car accident 5 years ago on Christmas Eve. She had once been vibrant, full of life, but the loss had hollowed her out, leaving her detached from the world. As Sarah listened to Emily's voice, something inside her stirred. The girl's song carried an ache that was both deeply personal and universally familiar. Sarah felt a pang of recognition. Her daughter used to sing that very song during the holidays, her small hands playing an imaginary piano as she belted out the lyrics with all the innocence in the world. Emily opened her eyes as the song ended. A few passers-by dropped coins into her tin can without breaking stride. Others barely noticed her at all, brushing past with bags and phones in hand. One man, visibly irritated, muttered, "This isn't a stage. Some of us have places to be." Emily flinched but quickly composed herself. She forced a small smile and began another song, her voice trembling at first but gaining strength as she went on. Sarah continued to watch, rooted to the spot, her emotions swirling between admiration, sorrow, and a strange sense of déjà vu. By the time Emily finished, Sarah had decided she couldn't just walk away. She took a step closer, her voice gentle but firm. "You have a beautiful voice, sweetheart," she said. Emily looked up, her blue eyes guarded. "Thank you," she replied softly, her fingers tightening around the can. Sarah hesitated. "Do you need help?" she asked carefully. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "We don't need anything," she said quickly, her tone defensive. The subway doors chimed, and Emily grabbed her tin can, ready to disappear into the crowd. Sarah wanted to call out, to say something that would bridge the gap between them, but the girl had already turned away. As Sarah watched Emily vanish up the stairs, she felt something she hadn't in years, a pull to act, to make a difference. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to hope. The following evening, Sarah found herself back at the subway station. She wasn't sure why she'd returned. She only knew she had to see the little girl again. The cold air bit at her cheeks as she stood on the platform, scanning the crowd. Then she heard it, the same hauntingly beautiful voice. Emily was there, standing at her usual spot near the tiled wall, singing another Christmas carol. This time it was "O Holy Night," her voice trembling slightly as she reached the high notes. A few commuters slowed their pace, dropping coins into her tin can. Sarah approached cautiously, waiting for the song to end before stepping closer. "You have a real gift," she said, offering a kind smile. Emily looked up, her guarded expression softening just slightly. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's your name?" Sarah asked gently. "Emily," the girl replied after a moment of hesitation. "I'm Sarah," the woman said, crouching slightly to meet her gaze. "Do you sing here every day?" Emily shrugged. "Most days. It helps." Sarah nodded, sensing that pushing too hard would only make Emily retreat. "You're very brave," she said, "singing in front of so many people like this." Emily didn't respond but shifted her weight uncomfortably. "Is your mom here with you?" Sarah asked, keeping her tone light. "No," Emily said quickly, clutching her tin can tighter. "She's at home. She's resting." The answer made Sarah's heart sink. It was clear there was more to Emily's story, but the girl wasn't ready to share it. The subway train roared into the station, sending a gust of wind through the platform. Emily took the opportunity to grab her things and head toward the stairs, her small figure disappearing into the crowd. But Sarah wasn't ready to let go. Keeping a safe distance, she followed Emily up the stairs and onto the street above. The girl walked quickly, weaving through the busy sidewalks until she reached the rundown apartment building. Sarah watched as Emily climbed the steps and disappeared inside. For a moment, Sarah stood frozen, debating what to do next. She knew she couldn't just walk away, not when the image of Emily singing in the cold refused to leave her mind. Finally, she turned and headed home, her thoughts racing. The next day, Sarah returned to the subway station, her heart heavy with determination. She couldn't explain it, but Emily's voice and resilience had struck a chord deep within her. For the first time in years, Sarah felt compelled to act, to break free from the isolation she had imposed on herself after losing her daughter. Emily appeared again, clutching her tin can, her oversized coat dragging slightly on the ground. Sarah stayed back, watching as the girl sang another carol, her voice as strong as ever despite the indifference of most passers-by. When the song ended, Sarah approached again, this time holding a steaming cup of hot chocolate. "Here," she said, offering it to Emily. The girl hesitated, her eyes narrowing. "Why?" "Because it's freezing out here," Sarah replied with a gentle smile. "And because you deserve something warm." Emily studied her for a long moment before finally accepting the cup. She took a cautious sip, her expression softening as the warmth spread through her. "Thank you," she murmured. "Emily," Sarah said softly, kneeling slightly to meet her eyes, "I know I'm a stranger, but I want to help you. Whatever you're going through, you don't have to go through it alone." Emily looked down at the cup, her small fingers tightening around it. "You can't help," she said quietly. "Maybe I can," Sarah said. "At least let me try." Emily hesitated, then looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. "My mom, she's sick," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the noise of the station. Sarah nodded, encouraging her to continue. "She needs medicine, but we don't have the money," Emily said, her words tumbling out in a rush. "So I sing. People give me money, and I save it for her. That's the only way." The weight of Emily's confession settled heavily on Sarah's shoulders. "Does she know you're doing this?" she asked gently. Emily shook her head. "She wouldn't let me if she knew." Sarah's heart broke a little more. She placed a hand over her own chest, as if trying to steady the emotion swirling inside her. "Emily, can I walk you home? I'd like to meet your mom." The girl's defenses shot up instantly. No, she wouldn't want that. Sarah didn't press further. Instead, she handed Emily a small envelope. "Take this. It's not much, but it might help." Emily opened the envelope hesitantly, her eyes widening at the sight of a few crisp bills inside. I can't take this," she stammered. "Yes, you can," Sarah insisted. "It's a gift. No strings attached." Emily looked at her for a long moment, then finally nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. As Emily turned to leave, Sarah felt the urge to follow her again, but she held back. Instead, she resolved to return the next day, determined to find a way to help not just Emily, but her mother as well. The next day, Sarah found herself standing outside the same rundown apartment building she had seen Emily enter. The windows were cracked, and the paint on the door was peeling, but a faint hum of life emanated from within. She hesitated for a moment, then climbed the stairs and knocked gently. After a few moments, the door creaked open, and a tired-looking woman appeared. Her pale face and hollow cheeks revealed the toll of illness, but her eyes were sharp and defensive. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice firm despite her fragile appearance. Sarah took a breath. "Hi, my name is Sarah. I met your daughter, Emily, at the subway. She's a remarkable little girl." The woman's expression shifted, a flicker of alarm crossing her face. "Emily? Is she okay?" "She's fine," Sarah said quickly. "She told me about you, about your situation. I wanted to see if there's any way I could help." The woman's shoulders stiffened. "We don't need charity," she said, her voice clipped. Sarah raised her hands in a gesture of peace. "I understand. I'm not here to judge or intrude. I want to help if you'll let me." The woman hesitated, her fingers tightening on the edge of the door. "Look, I don't know what Emily told you, but we're managing." "Laura," Sarah said softly, guessing her name from Emily's brief mention. "Managing shouldn't mean your 7-year-old has to sing in the subway to buy medicine." Laura's lips parted slightly, but she quickly closed them again. Her defenses were strong, but Sarah could see the cracks beneath. After a long silence, Laura sighed and opened the door a little wider. "Come in," she said reluctantly. The apartment was small and sparsely furnished. A worn-out couch sat in the corner, and a rickety table held a collection of prescription bottles. In the corner of the room stood a piano, its keys yellowed and several of them broken. It seemed out of place, a relic from a time when music might have filled the space. "I used to play," Laura said quietly, noticing Sarah's gaze. "My father taught me. He was a musician. He tried to teach Emily, too, before he passed. She's got his talent. It runs in the family," Sarah said with a small smile. Laura sat down slowly, the effort clearly taking a toll on her. "I don't like that she goes to the subway," she admitted. "But I don't know how to stop her. She thinks she has to save me." "She loves you," Sarah said. "And she's brave. But she shouldn't have to carry this burden." Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "I don't want her to think I'm weak," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want her to see me like this." "You're not weak," Sarah said firmly. "You're doing everything you can. But sometimes letting others help isn't weakness, it's strength." Laura looked at Sarah for a long moment, as if weighing her words. Finally she nodded, though her expression remained cautious. "I don't know what you can do," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah reached out and gently placed a hand over Laura's. "We'll figure it out. Together." Sarah left the apartment that day with a heavy heart but a renewed sense of purpose. She couldn't stop thinking about Emily and Laura, their resilience, their love for each other, and the overwhelming weight they carried alone. That evening, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, staring at the blank notepad in front of her. She thought about Laura's words, about how Emily had inherited her grandfather's talent for music. Then her eyes fell on a photo of her late daughter, Lily, playing the piano at a school recital. A memory surfaced, Lily's voice ringing out as she read aloud one of her favorite quotes. "The best gift is something you can give without expecting anything in return." Sarah closed her eyes, tears threatening to spill. That was it. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, Sarah returned to Laura and Emily's apartment, carrying a stack of flyers. Laura opened the door, surprised to see her again. "I have an idea," Sarah said, holding up one of the flyers. Laura hesitated, but invited her in. She read the flyer aloud. "Holiday benefit concert, celebrating the spirit of giving." Her brow furrowed. "What is this?" "I want to organize a concert," Sarah explained. "We'll gather local musicians and performers to put on a show. We'll tell Emily's story, not just the challenges, but her incredible talent and courage. People will want to help Laura. They just need to see what I see." Laura looked skeptical. "And you think this will work?" "I do," Sarah said firmly. "We can raise the money for your medication, maybe even more. But beyond that, we can remind people what the holidays are about: kindness, connection, and hope." Laura shook her head slowly. "I don't know. I don't like the idea of putting Emily in the spotlight like that." "She's already in the spotlight every day at the subway," Sarah pointed out gently. "This would be different. It would be safe, supported, and it would show her how much people care." Laura glanced toward the piano in the corner. Her expression softened, and Sarah could see the internal battle playing out in her mind. "Okay," Laura said finally, her voice trembling. "But only if Emily agrees." That afternoon, when Emily returned from the subway, Laura and Sarah sat her down to explain the plan. At first, Emily was hesitant. She was used to being ignored or dismissed by strangers. The idea of singing in front of a crowd made her nervous. "What if they don't like me?" Emily asked, her voice small. "They'll love you," Sarah said with a smile. "But even if they don't, what matters is that you're sharing something special. Your voice is a gift, Emily. It's meant to be heard." Emily looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll do it." Sarah beamed. "We'll start planning right away. This is going to be amazing." As they began brainstorming, Sarah felt something she hadn't in years, a sense of purpose, of being part of something bigger than herself. She had no idea what the concert would bring, but she was determined to make it a success, for Emily, for Laura, and for the memory of her own daughter. Over the next few weeks, Sarah poured her heart into organizing the benefit concert. She reached out to local musicians, explained Emily's story, and was overwhelmed by the response. Singers, instrumentalists, and even a local choir volunteered their time and talent. Sarah secured a small community hall decorated with twinkling lights and evergreen garlands, giving the space a festive and welcoming atmosphere. Emily, though nervous, practiced daily. At first, she sang alone in her apartment, her voice tentative and uncertain. But as Sarah began to visit regularly, offering encouragement and guidance, Emily's confidence grew. One afternoon, Sarah sat down at the piano in Laura's apartment, her fingers brushing the keys hesitantly. "It's been years," she admitted with a small laugh. Emily sat beside her, curious. "Did you used to play?" Sarah nodded, her expression bittersweet. "My daughter Lily loved the piano. She used to beg me to play with her, but I was never very good. She was the real musician." Emily looked at her with wide eyes. "What happened to her?" Sarah paused, her throat tightening. "She passed away a few years ago," she said softly. "But she loved Christmas and music. I think she would have loved to hear you sing." Emily reached out and placed a small hand on Sarah's. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice filled with genuine sympathy. Sarah smiled through the tears that threatened to fall. "Thank you, Emily. And thank you for letting me be a part of this. You brought something back into my life that I thought I'd lost forever." As the concert day drew closer, Sarah brought Emily to the community hall for rehearsals. The little girl's voice filled the space, and even the other performers were moved by her passion and purity. A local reporter heard about the event and offered to write a piece for the newspaper. Soon, word of the benefit concert spread, and tickets sold out within days. On the day of the concert, the hall buzzed with energy. Families, friends, and curious strangers filed in, their chatter mixing with the sound of instruments tuning. Emily stood backstage, clutching her microphone, her small hands trembling. "I'm scared," she whispered to Sarah, who knelt beside her. "It's okay to be scared," Sarah said gently. "But remember why you're doing this. Your voice has the power to touch people, Emily. Just be yourself, and they'll feel it." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. As the lights dimmed and the first act began, she peeked through the curtain, her nerves settling slightly as she saw the smiling faces in the crowd. When her turn finally came, Sarah gave her a reassuring hug. "You've got this," she said. Emily stepped onto the stage, the microphone trembling slightly in her hands. The spotlight shone down on her, and for a brief moment she froze. But then she closed her eyes, drew a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice, clear and achingly beautiful, filled the room. She sang the carol her grandfather had taught her, a song that had become a lifeline for her and her mother. The audience fell silent, completely captivated. As she reached the final note, a thunderous applause erupted. Emily opened her eyes, her cheeks flushed, and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. Backstage, Laura watched with tears streaming down her face, her heart swelling with pride. Sarah stood beside her, her own eyes glistening as she whispered, "She's incredible." The concert was a resounding success. After Emily's performance, audience members lined up to donate, some slipping bills into the collection box, while others offered heartfelt words of encouragement. A local news crew covering the event captured the emotional scene, and Emily became an unexpected symbol of hope and resilience in the community. After the concert ended, Sarah and Laura stood backstage with Emily, who clutched a bouquet of flowers someone had handed her. The little girl's eyes sparkled with pride and relief. "Did we get enough money?" she asked eagerly. Sarah smiled, kneeling to meet her gaze. "We got more than enough," she said. "Your voice did that, Emily. You inspired them." But just as Emily threw her arms around Sarah in celebration, Laura stumbled slightly, her hand gripping the edge of a nearby table for support. Her face turned pale, and beads of sweat formed on her brow. "Mom?" Emily asked, her voice filled with alarm. Sarah quickly stepped to Laura's side, wrapping an arm around her as Laura struggled to steady herself. "It's okay," Laura said weakly, though her labored breathing betrayed her words. "You're not okay," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to the hospital right now." At that moment, the door opened, and a man stepped in, his eyes wide with concern. Emily looked up, confused, and then her face softened with recognition. "Dad," she whispered. Laura's gaze hardened. "What are you doing here, Eric?" she asked, her voice sharp but weak from the strain of her health. Eric, Emily's estranged father, stood frozen in the doorway. He had been absent from their lives for years, but somehow he had learned about the concert and felt compelled to show up. His eyes flicked between Laura and Emily, his face filled with regret. I heard about the concert, Eric said hesitantly. Uh, I didn't know things were this bad. I want to help. Laura's expression was unreadable. Help? Where were you when we needed you? Sarah intervened, gently helping Laura sit down on a nearby chair. Laura, we need to get you to the hospital. Let's talk later. Eric moved toward them, his voice shaking. I was a fool, he admitted. I made mistakes, but I can see now how much I've missed. I want to make things right. Emily, still clutching her bouquet, looked at her mother, then at her father. The hesitation in her eyes was palpable. She had only vague memories of him, most of them hurtful. Mom, is it okay if he helps? Emily asked, her voice small and uncertain. Laura looked at Sarah, then back at Eric. There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice soft but firm. I can't promise anything right now. But if you're serious, Eric, you'll have to prove it. To both of us. Eric nodded eagerly, tears in his eyes. I will. I promise. I'll do anything it takes. Emily, uncertain but hopeful, extended her hand to her father. Eric took it gently, his face breaking into a tentative smile. The moment was fragile, but it held the weight of something deeper, an opportunity for healing, for forgiveness, and the possibility of a future where Emily's family could be whole again. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and sterile air, but it carried a strange sense of comfort. Laura lay in her bed, her cheeks pale, but her breathing steadier now. The doctors had administered the medication she needed, funded entirely by the proceeds of the concert. Though she was weak, her eyes were clearer than they had been in months. Emily sat beside her, clutching her mother's hand tightly. On her other side, Sarah and Eric stood together, watching over the family they had both come to care for in their own ways. Emily told me everything, Laura said, her voice soft but steady as she looked at Sarah. I don't even know where to begin thanking you. Sarah smiled warmly, brushing off the sentiment. You don't have to thank me. Emily's the one who brought us all together. Her voice, it reminded me of what I'd lost, but also of what I still had to give. Laura's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. She's always been stronger than I ever thought possible. Emily beamed at the praise but stayed silent, her focus on the steady rhythm of her mother's breathing. Eric cleared his throat, stepping forward hesitantly. I know I don't deserve to be here, he said, but I want to change that. I want to be part of this family again, if you'll let me. Laura studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. It's not going to be easy, she said finally. You left when we needed you the most. But if you're willing to put in the work, I'm willing to try. Emily looked up at her father, her voice quiet but clear. I want you to stay. Eric's breath caught in his throat. He knelt beside Emily, his voice breaking as he whispered, Thank you. I promise I'll never leave again. The room fell into a peaceful silence, the kind that comes after a storm has passed. For the first time in years, the small family began to feel whole again. In the days that followed, things began to shift. Sarah visited frequently, bringing books and warm meals to the apartment. Eric kept his word, showing up every day to help with chores and take Emily to school. He even fixed the old piano, restoring it to working order. One snowy afternoon, as Christmas approached, Sarah joined them for dinner. The piano's soft notes drifted through the apartment as Emily played the carol she had sung at the concert. Laura watched from the couch, bundled in a blanket but smiling warmly. Play it again, Emily, Sarah said, her voice filled with pride. Emily's fingers danced across the keys, her voice rising in perfect harmony with the melody. This time, the song wasn't about survival or desperation. It was a celebration of hope, love, and the quiet miracles that bring people together. As the music filled the room, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. She had found a purpose again, and in helping Emily and Laura, she had begun to heal her own heart. The best gift, she thought, truly are the ones that cannot be repaid.